I always thought my husband was just a broke handyman scraping by on odd jobs and leftover luck. But before we get into what I found out, make sure you hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and tell me in the comments what time it is and where in the world you're watching from. Alright. Let's get into it. We lived in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a building that smelled like mildew and old carpet. The kind of place where the radiator clanked all night and the neighbors argued through the walls. Our kitchen table had a wobbly leg we kept meaning to fix. We bought our dishes from a garage sale. Most Friday nights, dinner was whatever was on sale at the corner store. But one gray Wednesday morning, everything I thought I knew shattered into pieces. Because that was the morning 2 FBI agents showed up at my front door. And when they asked for my husband by a name I had never once heard before, I understood that the man sleeping beside me every night wasn't who I thought he was. He wasn't struggling. He was hiding. And what he was hiding had the power to ruin everything. My name is Rachel Mercer. And 7 years ago, I married a man I knew as James Holloway. I met James at a community center in Baltimore. I was volunteering at a weekend job fair, helping people update their resumes, and he walked in wearing a faded gray hoodie and work boots that had seen better days. He said he did handyman work. Plumbing, electrical, drywall, whatever people needed. He had the kind of hands that showed it too, calloused, rough, always with a small cut healing somewhere. He wasn't loud. He didn't try to impress anyone. He just sat down, smiled at me like he had nowhere else to be, and asked if I could help him fix the spacing on his resume. We talked for 2 hours that day. About everything and nothing. About the city, about bad luck, about what it felt like to start over. By the time the center was closing, I didn't want him to leave. 3 weeks later, we went on our first date. A food truck park near the harbor. Paper plates and plastic forks and the best evening I'd had in years. James told me he had grown up moving around a lot. Different cities, different schools. He said his family wasn't close and that he preferred not to dig into all of that. I understood that. I had my own chapters one didn't read out loud. So I didn't push him. Within a year, we were married. Small ceremony. 14 people. His side of the guest list had exactly nobody. I told myself that just meant he had chosen me as his family. And I believed that completely. Our life wasn't pretty, but it was steady. James picked up work wherever he could find it. Some weeks he came home with decent cash. Other weeks, he'd apologize quietly and say it had been slow. We made it work. We cut coupons. We skipped vacations. We celebrated anniversaries with homemade dinners instead of restaurants. He never complained. Not once. And every single night, no matter how tired he was, he'd sit with me on our secondhand couch and ask about my day like it was the most important thing he'd heard all week. That was the man I knew. But the signs were there. I just explained them away the way people do when they don't want to see the truth. James had no social media. Not a single account. When I asked him about it once, he just shrugged and said he didn't see the point. I laughed and called him old-fashioned. He never talked about old friends. No stories about college buddies or hometown memories. No one ever called to catch up. No one from his past ever showed up, not even a birthday text. And every few months, he would disappear for 2 or 3 days. He always called. Always checked in. But he was vague about where he was. Helping someone out of town, he'd say. Big job. I'll explain when I'm back. He never really explained. And I never really pushed. Because I trusted him. Because that's what love does. It fills in the gaps with faith. It was a Wednesday morning in late November. I remember the light. Cold and flat, coming through the blinds in thin strips. I had the day off work and I was still in my robe, standing at the kitchen counter with a mug of tea, thinking about nothing important. James was at the table behind me, eating toast and scrolling through a newspaper the old-fashioned way, actual paper. Something he always did. Then came the knock. It didn't sound like a neighbor. It didn't sound like a delivery. It was heavy. Deliberate. The kind of knock that announces itself like a statement. James put down his toast. He didn't move. He just went completely still, the way an animal does when it senses something wrong. His eyes didn't go to the door. They went to me. And that small thing, that 1 second where he looked at me instead of the door, that's when something cold moved through my chest. James Holloway? A voice came from the other side. Deep. Flat. Official. He closed his eyes for just a moment. Then he stood up slowly, the way someone does when they've been expecting something for a very long time and have finally stopped pretending it won't come. I got to the door first. 2 men. Both in dark jackets. One was tall with a neat beard. The other was older, silver at his temples, with eyes that took in everything at once. Both had badges clipped to their belts. The older one spoke first. "Good morning, ma'am. We're with the Federal Bureau of Investigation." He held up his credentials. "Is James Holloway home?" I couldn't speak. I just stepped back. James appeared in the doorway behind me. "I'm James," he said. His voice was calm. Steadier than it had any right to be. The 2 agents looked at each other. Just briefly. But I caught it. Then the tall one said, in a tone that was almost gentle. "Mr. Holloway, or rather, Mr. Thomas Wren." The room went absolutely quiet. I turned and looked at James. He didn't deny it. He didn't even flinch. And right there, in our little apartment that smelled like toast and cold air, I realized I had never known my husband's real name. Over the next hour, sitting at that same kitchen table with the wobbly leg, the agents explained everything. The man I knew as James Holloway was actually Thomas Wren. Years before we met, Thomas had been a highly skilled government intelligence analyst, specializing in financial crimes and international money laundering networks. He had spent years undercover, embedded deep inside one of the most dangerous financial crime organizations in the country, a syndicate that had funneled hundreds of millions of dollars through shell companies, corrupt banks, and ghost businesses across 3 continents. When the operation finally ended and arrests were made, Thomas was the key witness. The one who brought the whole thing down from the inside. But the people he helped put away had connections that didn't disappear when the cell doors closed. 2 of the organization's top figures had never been caught. And they had made it very clear, through channels the FBI took seriously, that they intended to find whoever had betrayed them. So Thomas Wren ceased to exist. James Holloway was born. And for 6 years, he had lived as quietly and invisibly as possible, doing everything he could to be the kind of man no one would ever look twice at. Including marrying me. I looked at him across the table for a long time after the agents finished talking. "You let me believe we were struggling," I said. "You let me count change for groceries." He looked at me and the pain in his eyes was real. Whatever else had been hidden, that part was not. "The more ordinary our life looked," he said quietly, "the safer you were. If you had known, it would have put a target on you. I couldn't do that to you, Rachel. I couldn't. Did you ever plan to tell me?" He didn't answer right away. "I hoped that one day it would be safe enough," he said. "I was waiting for safe enough." The agents explained why they had come. The 2 fugitives from the original case had resurfaced. They had been linked to a series of devastating financial attacks on infrastructure across the country, siphoning funds from pension accounts, regional banks, and government payment systems. Ordinary people were losing their savings. Small cities were losing their operating budgets. Thomas was one of the only people alive with deep enough knowledge of how that organization operated to help trace where the money was going and who was moving it. They needed him. He looked at the agents. Then he looked at me. "I won't agree to anything that puts my wife at risk," he said. "That's not negotiable." The senior agent nodded slowly. "We anticipated that. We're prepared to move both of you to a secure location for the duration of the operation. Mrs. Mercer will be protected." The room was quiet again. I thought about the 7 years. The wobbly table leg. The garage sale dishes. The way he'd asked about my day like it was sacred. I thought about all the mornings I had watched him leave in his work boots and thought, this man works so hard for so little. Except that wasn't the story at all. I reached across the table and put my hand over his. "Then you do it," I said. "You help them." We were relocated within 48 hours. I won't say where. I won't describe what those weeks looked like in detail, because some of it still doesn't feel entirely like mine to tell. But I can tell you that Thomas worked around the clock for nearly 4 months. That he barely slept. That there were nights I could hear him on the phone at 2 in the morning, his voice low and focused in the dark hallway outside our temporary room, dismantling something enormous piece by piece. And I can tell you that it worked. Federal authorities moved simultaneously across 7 states. Financial accounts were frozen before transfers could be completed. The 2 fugitives who had spent years hiding were arrested within hours of each other. Dozens of associates were taken in across the country. The network that had survived for years in the shadows was finally, fully, gone. The morning after the final arrests, Thomas came back to the room where I was waiting and sat down on the edge of the bed. He was exhausted in a way that went past tired. He looked like a man who had been carrying something for a very long time and had just been allowed to set it down. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. That was several years ago now. We don't live in that cramped apartment anymore. We don't count change or buy dishes from garage sales. Thomas consults privately now, helping organizations build defenses against exactly the kind of financial crimes he once spent years infiltrating. He's careful. He's quiet. He still reads actual paper newspapers. But some mornings, usually when it's gray outside and the light comes through the blinds in that flat, cold way, I think about that Wednesday morning. The knock that changed everything. The name I had never heard before. The moment I looked at the man I had built my life with and realized I had only ever known one layer of him, and that underneath it was something I never could have imagined. I thought I had married a man just barely keeping his head above water. The truth was, I had married a man who had gone to war with some of the most dangerous financial criminals in the country and won. And the whole time, he had been quietly, carefully, making sure none of that war ever reached my door. Before you go, I need to ask you something, and I want you to really think about it before you answer. If the person you loved had spent years hiding an enormous secret, not to deceive you, but to protect you, would that be enough? Would love and intention cancel out the years of half-truths? Would you stay, knowing they kept something that big from you? Or would the broken trust be something you just couldn't come back from? Drop your answer in the comments right now. I read every single one. And if this story hit you somewhere real, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new here. There are more stories just like this one waiting for you.